Good evening. Good evening and welcome. Thank you all so very much for being here. It's a real great pleasure to see so many of you here, and also really to have such a fantastic group of speakers who are going to be making presentations. I'll try to be very brief. Jesse Keenan, who is one of our faculty in the Department of Architecture, is going to be hosting this event and introducing our speakers. But I just wanted to give you a little bit of a context. Maybe some of you don't know. I'm just showing you on the screen a few images from a publication that was done here at the GSD now probably about 15 years ago. Some of you might know that Rem Koolhaas, together with some other faculty, they put together a series of publications, a research project, which was called the Harvard Design School Guide to Shopping. And this was a project that involved a great number of students over a few years, and essentially allowed them to focus on a whole host of topics, some of which Rem would sort of pick up later on in other publications like junk space, but also other topics like addressing the work of John Jurdy and many other topics that you see here, to really try and get at the question of the status of shopping and its relationship to design practice. It really dealt with a great deal of analysis of different kinds of spaces. This is John Portman's Marina Square in Singapore. But really trying to understand the relationship of shopping to different kinds of scales of practice. For example, comparing the work of Frank Gehry on the left-hand side, and just really understanding something of the scale of intervention of the work of John Jurdy, and seeing how the whole world of shopping was going into the direction of bigness and the sort of the massive scale of the project. Over the last few years, we've also been very lucky to continue these kinds of investigations at the GSD, and we've worked on a series of studios, for example, together with Craig Robbins, who's here with us tonight, on the Design District in Miami. And many of you were here earlier this semester when we had basically the president of Muji and its chief designer, Naoto Fukasawa, come and speak to us. In conversations with Craig and then a number of others, including many of our speakers here tonight, we felt that it would be really interesting to try and now have a series of discussions around the future of retail, future retail, and to see, in a sense, even the Muji presentation as part of a series, this kind of cycle of discussions. And when I talked to Professor Lal, Rajiv Lal, I think he was very, his guidance was that it would be really interesting to also focus on the impact of technology on contemporary retail. And so we've made tonight's event an event that is really focusing on that topic, and Jesse will talk more about that. I did want to remind us in a way that this interrelationship between the technology and physical space, or online sales and brick and mortar stores, bears an uncanny resemblance to many, many other areas where today we're facing this question of the relationship between the digital and the physical. For example, here at Harvard, there's been a lot of discussions, as you know, over the last few years about the development of edX, HarvardX, and the way in which online learning will affect the future of the academy and the campus, and how will our buildings change, and how will the fabric of the university change. And you could consider this kind of discussion in relation to many, many other fields, which I'm sure will also be part of something that we will touch on. So I hope that you are as excited by tonight's event and the kind of context of this broader conversation about technologies, its relationship to retail, as I am, and would like you to welcome Jesse Keenan, who will introduce our speakers and get us going. Thank you again for being here. Thanks.
The Amazonification of retail is simultaneously understood to be both an outcome and a catalyst of change in diminishing the conventional footprint of brick-and-mortar retail. However, from the perspective of real estate investment, the phased transition of department stores and aging malls within the context of shifting consumer demand has been nearly 15 to 20 years in the making. While the structural transformation of retail is partially a story of the convergence of physical and digital spaces, in more immediate terms, it is a narrative of compression of time and space along a supply chain continuum of product life cycling, inventory management, logistics, omni-channel marketing, and consumer engagement. These channels are blurring the boundaries between products and services, places of leisure and places of consumption, between bespoke specialization and mass production, and between necessity and luxury. While digital spaces seemingly dominate the many quantitative metrics of retail performance, it is physical spaces that increasingly qualify matters of brand experience and loyalty. Thinning labor forces are increasingly under pressure not only in terms of productivity, but also in terms of their ability to deliver knowledgeable translation of an increasingly wider variety of differentiated product lines developed to capture trends in customization, co-design, and the autonomous control of one's personal preferences. Brick-and-mortar retail is increasingly recognized not only as the landscape of this translation, but also for its experiential qualities. Whether it's Oak Labs' augmented reality dressing room or any number of Internet of Things applications, the boundaries of phygital spaces appear as dynamic as product interventions and seasons, trends, and experiences would support. As such, where do we draw the line between the lowest price online retailing and hybridized long-term strategies that recognize the multitude of values associated with the many processes of consumption? Tonight, we're joined by a distinguished group of individuals who have in their own capacity shaped our understanding of retail. Professor Rajiv Lal, the Stanley Roth Senior Professor of Retailing at Harvard Business School, will ground our proceedings in a broad overview of an ecosystem of passengers and drivers that are shaping retail. Eric Simon, Vice President, Global Retail of PTC, will offer insight on technology that operates to connect designers, producers, retailers, and consumers in the ambition to narrow the market lead time while at the same time maintaining quality control and strategic advantage. Neil Blumenthal, co-founder and co-CEO of Warby Parker, will contextualize the mechanics of the industry with a vision for retail that turns the tables of convention in favor of consumer convenience and experience. Finally, then, we will have the opportunity to reflect on tonight's speakers as they join in a conversation with Craig Robbins, President and CEO of DACRA, who is widely regarded as a visionary developer who has redefined the curation of retail within the context of placemaking, most notably, of course, in Miami's Design District. So to further steer our tonight's consumption of retail, I invite Professor Lal to join us.
Thank you, Jesse. Thank you, Mohsen, for giving me this opportunity to share some ideas that are in development. What I'd like to do is to just share with you what I think is possible in this domain of future of retail. So let me just start by showing you this picture. This was a book that we wrote and published in 2014. It was in the making a couple of years earlier. And the title was, Will Your Brick and Mortar Store Survive? So if you think about future of retail, that's one answer. And in this book, we made some predictions about what might happen to various sectors of retail. We said the supermarkets are too big. They need a smaller footprint to survive. Office supplies, we said, is no longer a category, so they need to reconceptualize. Electronics, it needs to be competitive on the basics. And then, of course, you need to improve your experience in the store. We said in this book, Walmart is too big a footprint, not convenient. Even the e-commerce may not be a good fit with their everyday low prices. So, what does their future look like? Home Depot, we thought it was in a sweet spot because they were using e-commerce both to lower cost as well as to create fantastic experiences for consumers who were trying to remodel their houses. And then you can extend this logic to other retailers, and we said Sears no longer relevant. JCPenney has lost its identity. You can get the gist of where I'm going. Nothing distinctive for Macy's. And if you look at what has been announced in the last 3 months, here's a list of stores that are list of retail chains that are closing at least 10% or more of their stores. So if you want to think about future of retail, here we are. So you might want to ask the question, why am I focusing on the past when I'm supposed to talk about the future? It's not because I want to tell you how correct we were. It's just to tell you that how wrong we are in terms of thinking about the future. That's what has happened. That's the past. But if you think about the future, I think we are really on the cusp of renaissance in retail. And the reason why I think that's possible is because of the technology that is now available today. Let me just share with you some technologies that make me think that this is not just a pipe dream. So let's just play a few videos. So the first one is Amazon Go.
4 years ago, we started to wonder, what would shopping look like if you could walk into a store, grab what you want, and just go? What if we could weave the most advanced machine learning, computer vision, and AI into the very fabric of a store so you never have to wait in line? No lines, no checkouts, no registers. Welcome to Amazon Go. Use the Amazon Go app to enter. Then put away your phone and start shopping. It's really that simple. Take whatever you like. Anything you pick up is automatically added to your virtual cart. If you change your mind about that cupcake, just put it back. Our technology will update your virtual cart automatically. So, how does it work? We used computer vision, deep learning algorithms, and sensor fusion, much like you'd find in self-driving cars. We call it Just Walk Out technology. Once you've got everything you want, you can just go. When you leave, our Just Walk Out technology adds up your virtual cart and charges your Amazon account. Your receipt is sent straight to the app, and you can keep going. Amazon Go. No lines, no checkout. No, seriously.
So this is not a concept. This is a store that's available to us to shop in. All right, let's cue the next one.
Amazon is developing a service to use drones to safely deliver packages to customers in 30 minutes or less. It's called Prime Air. We've started a new private trial for customers in the Cambridge area of England, and on December 7th, we completed our first delivery. Customers will choose from a selection of thousands of items tucked away in a Prime Air fulfillment center located just over the horizon from their homes. We have been operating fulfillment centers for quite a while now, but this one is unlike all the rest. These modest-looking buildings contain innovative Prime Air technology. Here's how it works. Moments after receiving the order, an electrically powered Amazon drone makes its way down an automated track and then rises into the sky with the customer's package on board. These drones are autonomous. From takeoff to landing and return, they operate completely on their own. Cruising quietly below 400 feet, carrying packages up to 5 pounds, and guided by GPS, our systems are designed to find their destinations safely. Within 30 minutes of placing the order, the customer receives their package. For this initial trial, customers can choose from the latest tech gadgets to their dog's favorite biscuits. We will use the data gathered during this beta test and the feedback provided by customers to expand the private trial to more customers over time. We're starting with 2 customers now, And in the coming months, we'll offer participation to dozens of customers living within several miles of our UK facility, and then growing to hundreds more. After that, well, it'd be easy to say, the sky's the limit. But that's not exactly true anymore, is it?
So if I draw your attention to the top left of the screen, it says not simulated. It is actually happening. Let's cue the next one, just to show you a different technology.
At the moment, I'm spraying basically the shoulders, which probably here is the area which we really need to build up the sleeves all around the arms. That really helps to create a very good layer to create a t-shirt. The beauty about this product is it dries instantly when it reaches to the body, to the skin. You can wash it. You can wear it again, yes. If I touch it now, it's totally dry. Okay, the beauty about now is like it starts to create the wrinkles of a garment, you see? And it's like, that's the difference that some people say body paint. It's not. Actually, we're creating a fabric, which, as you can see, the way it is attached when it's tied from the skin. You know, it's like here you can create the thickness as you want it. You know, it's like if you spray for a long time, then basically you're gradually creating all these different layers. Perfume on it, and it smells much nicer. This fabric also could come with many colors, and then now will be quite nice if we could just, you know, do a dark navy blue color. And it goes with your jeans, yeah? And your shoes. It was all planned. I think it's quite nice, just maybe the top, and then you have the contrast of the two.
That's your new garment. All right, that's good. Thank you. And then, of course, I mean, these are just sets of technologies that are coming online. And then, of course, there's a whole thing about 3D printing, which we don't have to talk about. But again, that's another technology that is so critical in these days. But if you ask the question, why is it that these technologies are going to have a big impact on retail, on the future of retail? I mean, if you just look back and ask the question, what's going on today? Shopping in stores has become a chore, and therefore, it was all about price. Once it became a chore, people, all they were thinking about is how to get something at a good price. And once the decision is all about how difficult it is to shop on one hand, and then, of course, it's all about the price, then the internet became the easiest way to solve that problem, because on the internet, shopping is very convenient, it's very easy. You can do it by a click. And of course, the prices are lower simply because the economics works better. So you can see why, as Mohsin was saying, the internet is really taking over a lot of the sales in brick and mortar stores. And today, with the consumer being very empowered and fully in control of their shopping behaviors, they make all these decisions, and it's not easy to get them into the mall exactly for these reasons, and you can see how the stores are suffering. So you have two choices. You either shut down your stores, which many of them are doing, or you have to reconceptualize your stores. You have to ask the question, what can the store do in light of what is already being done on the internet? Now, some answers are there, right? If you take a look at what can we do in the store, how can we change it, and everybody talks about this, that we want the stores to be more entertaining, more engaging. There should be a lot of fun. And there are examples of that, because if you ask people, what do you think about the Apple Store? Most people find it very engaging, very stimulating. They love to go to the store. And believe me, you can spend $1,000 in that store within a matter of few minutes, less than 5 minutes. In fact, you don't even ask the price when you go to that store. You go check out the stuff, and you're willing to drop $1,000 without a problem. So it is true that in certain ways, if you can engage the consumers, entertain the consumers, help them with the process of discovery, consumers are willing to pay for it. So the other question then to ask is, can we try to find a way to replicate this Apple experience in other stores? And by and large, I think a lot of people have found difficulty in doing that. But I think it's time that technology can really begin to answer that question for us. And I think the way we think about is, because of technology, you can ask questions that we could not have asked before. And in particular, you can ask the question about shopping for what, or what is the problem that we are trying to solve. And I'll take you to two locations, right? One is simply supermarkets, and the other is simply apparel stores. If you are in a supermarket, in many situations, very simple. You want to get in and get out. You want to buy a bottle of milk, or you want to get your half a dozen eggs, and you want to get out, in which case you can go to Amazon Go, or you can have it delivered by the drone. But then there are times when you go to the store and the question is asked is, what would you like to eat tonight? Right? That's a more complex question. And until now, when you went to the store, you could not solve that problem, even though you had some ideas. And the answer to that question is quite complex, because it could be in many forms. Some people might say, I want to have fish tonight. Somebody might want to think about a specific dish. Somebody might want to think about a specific cuisine. Some people might want to recreate some experiences that they have had. Or some people might want to say, I want to taste certain flavors tonight. And those are very different questions, answers to the same questions. But I think with technology, you can begin to explore some of these questions that could have never been explored before. And you can also see that answering these questions involves a lot more risk than buying half a dozen eggs. Yes, I want to have certain flavors tonight, but whether or not I will be able to execute on that proposition is an open question. I might go and then make a recipe or make something and find out that it was a disaster. So that is the risk involved. But I think with technology today, you can begin to go down that path. And if you look at what augmented reality, virtual reality, digital assistants are doing for us, I think you can indeed begin to explore these kinds of questions that could have never been answered in the context of a supermarket. And I think if you want to begin to answer these questions in a way, I would imagine that the experience in these stores will become more engaging, they'll become more entertaining, they will become more satisfying. And so that is one way I can see supermarkets which are being affected quite negatively can become and reconceptualize themselves so that they become more relevant today. Similarly, if you think about an apparel store, here's a situation that I've seen many times before. This is somebody who's standing in front of their closet and asking and saying, I do not have anything to wear. Who said these famous words? Anybody who knows that? Who said these famous words? I don't have anything to wear. Sorry? Women. It's not who. It's all women who say that. My wife says that very frequently. Men don't say that. They are very boring. So I was exposed to this idea about 10 years ago when I was writing a case in Japan. And Mr. Suzuki, who was then the CEO of Ito Yokodo, and he was trying to turn around a department store business, and he says, this is my real problem. women have a closet full of clothes, but whenever they are going to a party, they look at their closet and say, I don't have anything to wear. So what is the problem? And he said, the problem is, what they're saying is that there's nothing that fancies their imagination for the occasion that they're thinking about. And if I can find solutions, if I can make proposals that really catches their imagination, they will be willing to pay anything or almost anything for something like that. Okay? So now if you take a look at today, you can begin to answer this question in many ways. You can say, okay, what would you like to wear? And answer comes in many forms, right? It could be a brand, it could be a style, it could be how fashion forward you want to be, how expressive you want to be, what kind of individuality you want to project tonight, what mood you may be in. So those are very different ways of answering this question about nothing fancies my imagination when standing in front of a closet. And once again, if you look at technologies today, you can begin to see a set of solutions that can actually begin this consumer who's not satisfied with their closet full of clothes to really start enjoying the idea of shopping. So these are technologies that are currently available and are being put together to kind of get us onto this journey where we can ask these more complex questions and have satisfaction at a very different level than we could have ever imagined before. So let me show you a couple of examples of this technology. So can you play this, please?
Tech and fashion don't always mix. Wearables are ugly, and people still want to try things on in a store. But Rebecca Minkoff has built a tech-fueled fashion line that redefines all of this. Bracelets that charge your phone, dresses with a 3D print, and a boutique that changes the way people shop. And it starts with these mirrors.
First thing I'd do is I'd ask you if you want something to drink. So we'll go over here to Sip, and what we do is we have a menu option. So it could be water, sparkling water, green tea, coffee, espresso, or even bubbly.
I don't see a fine scotch on there.
We'll have to add that just for you.
Thank you. You specifically have a software background, and I think a lot of people would think that that doesn't really translate into fashion. But what was the lessons that you brought from software that you found a really surprising application for here?
Kind of every step of the way, I took this kind of tech-first initiative. You know, who's the end user, right? What does the funnel look like? So it's kind of been this tech-focused way to building a fashion company, and it was very different. And so running a company with those thoughts in mind, just add a different mentality that I think gives us kind of an X factor.
And in partnership with eBay, which built the technology, they use this X factor to guide me through the store. I ordered a green tea, which was delivered to me, and some items to, well, probably not to try on, but I got a text when they were ready in my dressing room. We picked up a jacket along the way to keep the system on its toes.
We're going to come in, and as you just saw, it just popped up on the screen.
Wow, that was really fast. It instantly knew what was in the room.
Yeah, so one of the things we'll do here is we'll come back here. Clearly we have a small here, but let's say the small didn't fit, right? And we wanted an extra small. And so we're going to say, bring this to my room. It's kind of like with Uber, right? So you see that.
Exactly like with Uber.
So now you know who your store associate is. And so she's going to be there in a minute. So you now don't need to leave half naked. You don't need to go. You don't need to go finding out who works here, who's my stylist, right? You get to stay here.
Because the only thing worse than asking if somebody works here is asking if somebody works here while you're
half naked. Exactly. The other thing we looked at was lighting. You might want
Soho After Dark.
Soho After Dark lighting. If you want something that's more sunny, you have Brooklyn Morning, Afternoon on the High Line, or the Hudson River Sunset. Now you can get some confidence around what it might look like in your end use case. Again, a software term, but what's the end use case?
And what does Rebecca Minkoff get? A valuable data record of everything her customers like and what they're pairing it with. And that is getting her attention from everyone. Do you expect that your competitors, if you think of them as competitors, are coming in here and seeing these things and starting to build them for themselves?
We know our competitors are coming.
Again, it kind of begins to show you what is possible. And if on top of that you begin to ask the question, how can you see some of this stuff in augmented reality, in virtual reality? How can you project your own closet in your home into the dressing room? That is possible today, especially if your clothes becomes digitized, right? So you can begin to see the possibilities that begin to emerge when you think about using this technology. Here's another video, but I won't show it to you, but it shows you how somebody sitting in Hong Kong can actually shop in Macy's in Herald Square and place an order and have it delivered to their Hong Kong address. So this is the power of this technology. So let me just close by making a couple of observations. I mean, I think if you think about what this technology can do for us, it can indeed begin to give us the opportunity to live in the moment. What is it that I want to do right now, which changes, and to the extent that it is variable, it makes life more interesting. Experiences our senses more intensely. Many of the shopping experiences are very, very bland, and I think that's why people are bored about it. You can begin to think about taking risks, trying some things that we have never tried before. It will allow us to have our experiences more socially. You can get feedback from people while you're in your dressing room, potentially. So I think this technology will allow us to live more imaginative lives. I mean, that's the promise of something like this. So thank you for your attention.
Okay, very happy to be with you tonight. I'll have to stop myself from walking around, which is how I usually present. But it's an exciting time to be in retail. And as you can see by some of Professor Lal's slides, not an exciting time for all retailers, but it's an exciting time for retail technology in particular. And what I'm going to talk to you about this evening is a couple of things. We're going to put a little bit of facts and figures behind some of what Professor Lal talked about in terms of the disruption right now and the transformation that retail is undergoing. We're going to talk about what that means for retailers. What are the implications for retailers? And then we'll get into a bit of the emerging technologies, and I will show one video. Thankfully, it's not any of the same ones that Professor Lal showed, but we'll have another video that talks about how basically some of the technologies, the emerging technologies that we're going to discuss this evening can be used to do some really creative things in the store. So let's get going. So this was my attention grabber, but what do all these retailers have in common? But if you were paying attention to Professor Lal's presentation, you already know what they have in common. These are retailers that just in the first 2 months of this year shuttered a lot of stores or announced that they were shuttering a lot of stores. In fact, thousands of stores amongst just these brands, all of which are very recognizable. A couple of them are going to go out of business altogether. What do they have in common? They're shutting stores. Primarily, they're mall-based retailers. Foot traffic to malls is generally down. And what you're seeing is that a lot of traditional retailers are closing a lot of locations. At the same time, you have online retailers, interestingly enough, and Neil's going to talk to you about his experience, that are opening brick and mortar stores. So it's not just about brick and mortar, but it's about what they're used for. So let's look at a little bit of the facts and figures. If you look at, I mean, nobody would dispute that retail is just undergoing a massive disruption, massive transformation. And if you look at sales in retail, just about all growth in sales in retail is coming from e-commerce. Overall, e-commerce still only accounts for about 10% of total retail sales, but that's where all the growth is coming from. And it's coming across a lot of different product lines, as you can see in the graph on the lower left. Even though we saw some videos about food and beverage and grocery, really that's almost an untapped market at this point. That's a $700 billion a year market in the US alone, and very little's been done so far in terms of moving that to e-commerce. And of course, you can look at the Amazon growth graph, and so we work with retail, apparel, footwear companies, and just about every retailer that we speak to, you ask them what keeps them up at night, and they'll tell you it's Amazon. How do we compete with Amazon? How do we do things differently? Okay. So what was interesting, so we went to we go every year to the National Retail Federation, NRF's big show in New York City, and the Javits Center has about 30,000 people there and about 500 technology exhibitors. And sat in on a panel discussion. The CEO of Camuto Group said, over the last 5 years, there's been an absolute fundamental shift in power in retail. It used to be that retailers and designers could basically determine what people were going to buy. They would come up with the ideas, they would put those ideas in, they would create the products, and those ideas would go to the stores, and that's what consumers would buy. That's flipped entirely on its head, and the power is in the hands of the consumer. The consumer has access to social media. They basically create their own taste, curate their own interests, And they're the ones that are primarily dictating what it is they want to buy. And the challenge now for retailers and brands is to be able to tap into that and be able to, understand those trends, understand what consumers want, the different personas of individuals that are buying, and then making sure that they get products to the market that those consumers want to buy. Okay? Some would call it the Zara effect. The typical product life cycle for an apparel item might be over 100 weeks still for a traditional company that brings one of those to market. Hard to believe, but the cycles are really that long. Zara does it in 2 weeks, right? They have a fundamentally different business model. So where you used to have 4 seasons in a retailer in a year, and they would change out the assortment roughly 4 times a year, Zara does it every 2 weeks. Consumers, as consumers, we're expecting rapid change, and we've lost our patience with a lot of those types of things. So while e-commerce is sort of the disruptor, the real disruptor in this whole retail thing that we're talking about is the digital consumer. It's all about the digital consumer. That's what led to all of this, and it's going to continue. If we look at the digital consumer, what are their characteristics? Well, we're all digital consumers, probably. We're all connected. There are over 2 billion cell phones in the world. About 90% of people report that they use their phone in some way, shape, or form to either shop or assist them with shopping. We're all informed. So when we as consumers, whether we're in a store or whether we're shopping online, if we're in a store and we want to find out more information, the top 3 things that consumers are looking for, they're looking for price, looking for availability, and they're looking at reviews, and ideally reviews from people that they know. We all trust that these days more than paid advertising for the most part. Consumers are engaged. They want to have a different type of experience. We want to be engaged with the brands that we're buying from. And we're demanding I wanted to use the word spoiled, but I didn't want to be too judgmental. We all want speed. We're really fond of the idea of free delivery the next day or 2 days from now, convenience. We want things that are personalized for us. And we don't really want to pay for all that. We still want to get it at the lowest cost, ideally. Right? So those are the characteristics of the digital consumer that's led to all this disruption. And if you look further at the growth in e-commerce sales, it's not just about e-commerce. I got to stop hitting that. I talk too much with my hands. I apologize. It's really about mobile commerce. The sales on mobile have just been skyrocketing as a growth engine. So what are the implications for retail? The implications for retail are pretty profound. They really fundamentally transform the way that most retailers have to operate. First is omni-channel. With regard to omni-channel, this word's been around for a number of years. It really talks about a couple of things. We as consumers want a frictionless buying experience, whether we're buying something on our phone or in the store, or we order it on our phone and we want to go pick it up in the store. It's got to be frictionless. And on the back end, the retailers themselves, they got to figure out how to do all of that. How do we put fulfillment models and systems in place that allow us to provide a frictionless experience to the consumer? Social and mobile engagement. If you think about the power shift from retailers and designers to consumers, how do retailers and designers influence, what consumers are going to want from them? Well, it's to get out there in the places that consumers are spending time, and we're all spending time on social media sites and other things like that. So engaging with consumers in the place where we spend time is an imperative for retailers. Professor Lyle showed some great examples about the consumer experience in the store. Basically, we need a reason to go to a store these days, and we want, creative and compelling experiences. Speed is another imperative, and it's speed in terms of being able to tell a consumer product availability and cost and options that they have for shipping, but also speed for bringing products to market. Just about every brand and retailer that we talk to, their number one objective right now is shortening their cycle time, being able to bring product to market faster. Okay, even as their supply chains have gotten more global and complex. And then there's the whole area of digital innovation. You started to see some of these things in the back half of my talk tonight. What we're going to do is talk about some of the emerging technologies that really are in the whole area of physical and digital convergence. The use of 3D, not printing, but 3D for design, and AR and VR for design, and the Internet of Things, which is playing an increasingly huge role, even if we don't realize it, as well as analytics in the forms of machine learning and artificial intelligence. The other thing, and I may be biased because I work for a company that provides technology that helps people design products, but I don't think I'm wrong, even though I'm biased. Products actually still matter. At the end of the day, all this consumer experience stuff is important, but you still need to deliver products to market that people want to buy. Otherwise, the rest of it doesn't really matter a whole lot, okay? So in the back half of the presentation, we're going to talk primarily about these emerging technologies and how designers and people who are creating product have access through IoT and other technologies to information on a scale they've never had before, and how that informs product design. Okay? A few more facts and figures here. Where are retailers spending? The good news is that retailers are spending in areas that align with those imperatives I just talked about. This is for 2017. This Innovative Retail Technologies was the source of this information. A majority of retailers are investing in omni-channel systems and technologies, as we talked about. Inventory visibility, which is a big one. If we want a frictionless experience, that retailer needs to know where any inventory is in their system at any given time, whether it's in the store, the warehouse, or somewhere down in the supply chain. A lot of retailers are investing in in-store software around wireless and Wi-Fi. And a lot of that's to be able to take advantage of things, other technologies in the store, to be able to give the consumer a different experience and a compelling experience in the store. In terms of hardware, it's about mobile devices and mobile POS hardware. Devices that, as you saw, a couple of videos that we're putting in the hands of associates to help them help customers in a different way. And in marketing and operations, it's really about customer experience and social media marketing and even email marketing, which is still very, very prevalent. So these are the areas that retailers are investing, and again, that aligns pretty well to the implications and the imperatives that we just discussed. Now, let me take a minute to, before I get into our view at PTC on the retail technology market, I just want to tell you a little bit about PTC. You may be wondering, who we are and why I'm up here. PTC is a software company. It's actually based just up the road in Needham, Massachusetts. And really a couple of key areas of our company. One is a software solutions area of our company, and in the retail, fashion, and apparel and footwear market, it's primarily those three initials there, PLM, Product Lifecycle Management. We provide technology to companies in broadline retail and in luxury brands, athletic brands, and other types of retail apparel footwear companies to help them design products, develop those products in a fair amount of detail, source those products, and ultimately deliver them to market. And you can see some of the, just a handful of the logos of the companies that we work with. The other part of the company is really the emerging technology part of our company, which is the Internet of Things. So we have the leading Internet of Things platform on the market that really enables what I'm going to talk about next, which is physical and digital convergence. Okay? Physical and digital convergence is really our mission, is to help companies unlock the value that's associated with being able to bring the physical and digital worlds together. Anybody notice the logo looks a little bit like a yin and yang symbol? It also happens to be a stylized P and a stylized D for physical digital convergence. Brilliant logo. I wish I had thought of it. I didn't. But our CEO is incredibly proud of that logo. Thinks it's one of the best he's ever seen, and I have to agree. But it's about being able to do things like take a physical thing and provide information in the augmented world on top of that, so that you can view it on your smartphone and not only see the physical thing, but see information about that physical thing. And then it's about being able to take information from the digital world and improve the physical products that you're making. Okay? So that's really our mission in life. We also have collaborated over the last couple of years with Harvard Business School on a couple of groundbreaking articles in the area of IoT, and it's all about how IoT technology is transforming companies and competition in the marketplace. We don't have time to kind of dive into these in any great degree of detail, but from what I understand, these are two of the most downloaded articles in the history of the Harvard Business Review. Okay, so pretty cool stuff. If you want to read more detail, there's tons of detail in these articles about the way that IoT is transforming companies and competition. All right, so let's talk a little bit about, so this is our perspective on emerging retail technologies, okay? And we're going to bucket them into 4 areas, and I'm going to show you an example or 2 in each area. When we talk about emerging technologies, most of them are what we would think of as smart and connected. They utilize IoT and some other advanced technologies. And the first category is a lot of what we've already seen and what you see in the business press and the industry press. It's technology to enable smart connected consumers or smart connected store experiences. So you have things like beacons in the stores and mobility applications and augmented and virtual reality to deliver things like personalized offers so that when you walk in the store, it recognizes you from your smartphone, knows what you like to buy, and it might send you an offer or a coupon for something that's in the store that the artificial intelligence knows that you like to buy. The virtual fitting room mirrors, et cetera. These are all things that there's a lot of press about them. You read about them, you see them in videos. I'm going to show you a video of a connected store. It happened to be something that was created by a business partner of ours called Calypso using our ThingWorx IoT platform. Not meant to be a commercial, but just to show you what's possible. And then we're going to hit 3 more categories of emerging technologies that have nothing to do with probably what you read about and see on TV, because it doesn't have anything to do with consumers or stores. So let me see if this will play okay.
The Internet of Things, or IoT, is more than just the things of connected products, sensors, and devices. IoT can provide deeper visibility and insights into customers, competition, product portfolio, and performance in real time. The opportunity for IoT in the retail industry is huge, and getting started with a quick, high-value project is easier than you think. At Calypso, we have a unique set of capabilities to jumpstart IoT efforts, enabling strategy through process and technology. Through a partnership with ThingWorx, Calypso's Smart Connected Store demonstrates how retailers can create a smarter, more connected store. Our retailer is able to track consumer behavior by sensors embedded in products through RFID technology. In-store Bluetooth beacons track our customer and her smartphone to provide contextual information as she moves throughout the store. The information collected during our shopper's visit, along with historical data, can be analyzed in real time, allowing the retailer to send push notifications of personalized promotions and greetings. The mobile app provides our shopper with the ability to check store inventory herself. She's able to see other available sizes and colors and explore sites like Amazon for the lowest price offered, which allows our retailer to price match. While browsing the store, our endless end cap concept alerted our shopper that she was near an item that was often purchased along with the shirt she's holding. She browses suggested items not seen in store, and the endless end cap virtually extends our retailer's aisle. Because our shopper is connected to the store associate has insight into historical purchases and average spending limits, creating a tailored customer service experience. The virtual closet connects back to the retailer's inventory system so shoppers are able to virtually try on clothes that aren't actually seen in store. NFC-equipped devices allow shoppers to quickly and securely pay for merchandise. ThingWorx allows retailers to organize the data received from customers and products in their stores to find and act on demographic trends. Our goal with the Calypso Smart Connected Store is to spark ideas and expand the mind of retailers to the possibilities when we bridge the gap between the digital world and the physical world. The technology is here, right now, to create an incredible shopping experience for your consumer and to build huge value for retailers. So, what can you imagine with IoT?
So that's one way, or multiple ways, of using IoT technology to enable an in-store experience. And funny enough, the shopper and the store associate are both Calypso employees. So they work for a consulting company and they were acting in the video. So they actually did a pretty good job. Okay, so let's talk about 3 other categories of emerging technology, ones that you probably don't hear about as much as it relates to the retail environment. So the second category of emerging technologies is in store operations. So this would be not, interacting with consumers, but actually how you operate the store, things that happen in the store to make it work. The goal here is to have an efficient set of store operations, and some of the technologies that get applied here are AR, VR, IoT, and machine learning. And some of the applications are things like virtual layout planning, being able to, instead of having to set up a physical set of store shelves to see how your products are going to look on display, that you're able to do that through an augmented reality or a virtual reality kind of an experience. Things like real-time inventory visibility within the store. Also, training employees in the store using AR work instructions and VR types of technologies. Companies are actually working on employee training that's much more cost efficient and immersive, as well as connective service. This one's a little bit more obscure, but if you think about retail stores, they all have systems like HVAC units and lighting and refrigeration if you're a grocery store. Being able to connect to those, monitor their performance using IoT technology, predict when they're going to break, and then use augmented reality to help the repair person figure out how to fix it, is all pretty cool stuff. That's actually happening today. You wouldn't know it. It's all behind the scenes kind of stuff. But I'm not going to show any more videos, but a couple of us were talking before the presentation started about the adoption of VR and AR in retail. And initially, what you're seeing is, as much as you see these consumer applications, a lot of the initial investment in AR and VR in retail is in the area of inside the store. Simulation exercises, employee testing and training, and computer modeling. And here's just a couple of screenshots of what a virtual display would look like. So before this technology, you'd have to go out, get the cooler, put all the drinks in it, organize them, take a look at what it looks like to see what it was going to look like in the store. Now you can draw data from PLM systems and use AR technology to be able to do it virtually. Much more cost effective and pretty cool. So that helps. Okay. The next category is product design and creation. So this is the area where the company that I work for primarily operates. And with product design and creation, a few things that retailers and brands are trying to achieve. They're trying to get product to market faster, and they're trying to personalize it and get the right assortment and the right channel at the right time for consumers. There is a ton of emerging technology being applied in product design and creation. I'm going to show you a few examples of 2D and 3D digitized design. Increasingly, companies are moving from manual design, using pencil and paper, to digital design, using new tools. 3D and 2D tools. Virtual sampling. What that means is, let's say you were a designer and you were going to be creating this sport coat. The very first thing you would do is create a design of it, and then a vendor, probably half a world away, needs to create a sample, a physical sample for you that they need to ship to you. God, sorry. I talk with my hands. A physical sample that they need to ship to you. And then you evaluate that sample and you tell them what's wrong with it, and you go through the cycle many more times. And each time there's cost and there's lead time. Now technology exists to make that process virtual, cutting an incredible amount of time and cost out of the system, not to mention a sustainability issue, because millions of samples are created every year for all kinds of fashion and footwear and consumer items. And you know what happens to all of them? They get thrown away. They get buried somewhere. So if you can do less of that and more virtual sampling, you can save a lot of money and actually help with sustainability as well. So let me just show you a few of these real quick, and then we'll get on to the last category. This is an area that we call digital concept management, where today, if you walk into a brand, somewhere in New York City, and you've got a bunch of designers deciding what the collection for the new season is going to look like, it's probably a big board or a bunch of boards or hangers around a big conference room where they're hanging all kinds of samples and fabrics and pictures. Now there's technology to be able to do that digitally, and to be able to have anybody in the world look at this and collaborate with you, and they don't have to be in the conference room with you. Okay, so that's some pretty cool stuff for digital concept management. We have 3D design. So there's technology that exists now that where you don't actually need a fit model to create an accurate size for a garment. You can do it virtually using avatars. So avatars aren't just for video games. These are being used in brands and retailers all across the country and around the world to create 3D designs of new garments, which then can be virtually sampled. And again, it just cuts a lot of time and cost out of the system. It's pretty cool stuff. And it's very photorealistic these days. Here's another one, which is using trend analytics and consumer personas to decide on what an assortment's going to be like for the upcoming season. Historically, you think, all right, we're going to have an assortment of yoga pants in our sporting goods store. We have to fill 10 slots. How are we going to do that? What companies are increasingly doing is using trend analysis, consumer persona analytics, which tap into social media and all kinds of data, to identify the 3 different types of yoga pant buyers, which are the fashion statement buyer, the take it easy buyer, and the on-the-go buyer, and then be able to predict what kind of price they're willing to pay. All right, you all fit in one of those categories if you wear yoga pants? All right, probably do. Be able to predict the winners and losers for any given fabric type, any given style with particular personas. The analytics that are going into this are just incredible. Okay. The other thing that's really cool is that IoT and every one of these connection points, whether it's a loyalty program that you engage with a retailer, or social media, sales data, trend data, wearables, what we call voice of the customer, which is a consumer testing thing. All of those things provide data to designers to help them better inform the design of the products they're making, and they're speeding the time to market around those products. So it's not just about inspiration, it's about hard data getting into the design process, okay? And then finally, on the supply chain side, is kind of the final area of retail where we see emerging technology. And here, a lot of this is around RFID tagging. So actually having an RFID tag on every garment or every sample that is anywhere in the supply chain, be able to track that, and using things like dashboards to be able to track that. And here's just an example of that, where you're looking at a supplier who might be half a world away and having some transparency and visibility into what it is they're doing for you, okay? So I'm a little over time, I apologize, I'll wrap up here. Key takeaways really for me: retail continues to undergo this massive transformation, a lot of implications for retail, and we just looked at a lot of the emerging technologies that are leading the way. So thanks for your time. I'm going to turn it over to Neil for the next part of it.
All right, well, really excited to be here. Thanks to Craig and Jackie for inviting me. And I want to tell you a little bit about the story of Warby Parker to provide some context and use it as an example of some of the shifts that are happening in retail today, and talk about our journey into bricks and mortar, which did not seem obvious for us. So this story starts with a pair of glasses. Has anybody walked out of an optical shop, felt like they got ripped off, or that the glasses were a little bit more expensive than they wish it would be? Yeah, pretty much anyone that's bought a pair of glasses. And that's where this is. We just believe that glasses shouldn't cost as much as an iPhone, right? There's no rare earth metals in it. The technology is about 800 years old. And we were sitting on campus in a building much like this at Penn, at Wharton. And my buddy Dave was complaining about leaving a $700 pair of glasses in the seat pocket of an airplane. He was traveling before business school, and he had worked at Allen & Company, so he could afford a $700 pair of glasses. But now, as a full-time student, wasn't about to replace those. I had, before business school, run a nonprofit social enterprise called Vision Spring that would train low-income women to start their own businesses in the developing world, giving vision screenings and selling glasses in their communities, often for just a few dollars in places like India and Bangladesh and sub-Saharan Africa. There I was sort of learning a lot about the power of a pair of glasses to transform someone's life, but also learned a lot about the optical industry and how there were a few very large players that dominate the industry, one of which owns Oakley, Ray-Ban, Oliver Peoples, Persol and Arnett, licenses major fashion brands like Chanel and Ralph Lauren and Dolce & Gabbana and Prada, and the list goes on. They also happen to own a lot of optical retailers, some of the big ones you may have heard of, like LensCrafters and Pearle Vision and Sunglass Hut and Sears Optical and Target Optical. And then also the second largest vision insurance company in the country, iMed. And that's all owned by one company, Luxottica, has a market cap of about $25 billion, which actually was just announced that they're merging with the second largest company in the optical industry, Essilor, that makes pretty much all of the lenses that are in your frames today, and the combined entity will be about $55 billion. But when you look at that, you see that there's lots of incentives to keep the prices of glasses really high. So as we were talking about this, I thought back to how I would manufacture glasses for people living on less than $4 a day, and visit these factories in the Shenzhen region of China, and 10 feet away on the production lines right next to where I was producing glasses for people living on less than $4 a day, you'd see some of the biggest fashion labels coming off these lines. And it didn't make sense why glasses were so expensive, but within the context of the industry dynamic, it made a lot of sense. And while we're having this conversation in a building just like this, our other buddy, Andy, sort of mentions, like, why isn't anybody selling glasses online? We had seen category after category move online. This is fall of 2008. Zappos was now selling shoes online, a category nobody thought could be sold online. Blue Nile was selling engagement rings and being quite successful. So we thought, oh, well, someone's going to probably make a lot of money selling online. And if we're able to sell online, then we can bypass sort of the retailers. We wouldn't have to wholesale any of our products, so we'd be able to basically sell our glasses at wholesale, provide all that retail markup to our customers, and sell glasses for a fraction of the price. And you know, when you have a discussion and you sort of leave it, but it's not quite complete, this was one of those moments where we all had to run off to class, and then later that night, you sort of have that feeling in your gut. And I remember I couldn't sleep, and at about 2 o'clock in the morning, I emailed Andy and Dave, and our other buddy Jeff had been right next to us while we were having this conversation, and he had a similar experience. And I emailed them at 2 in the morning, and at 2:01, Dave responded. And at 2:02, Andy responded. And 2:03, Jeff responded. And we were all up thinking about this. And that's when we knew that this was something that we wanted to pursue. So the next night, what did we do? We all went to a bar and sort of made the decision to sort of pursue this idea. And the idea, again, was to design the frames that we loved and use premium materials, but sell them for a fraction of the price, for $95 instead of $500. And e-commerce was really going to be the channel for us to be able to do that, right? We were going to develop our own brand, so we didn't have to pay a licensing fee, and we were going to sell direct to consumer, cut out the middleman, so we could deliver that, you know, price, the value at much less. And as we were going through this, we just always had the mindset of the consumer in mind. And I think if you were to ask us how would we describe ourselves, it would be as experienced designers. We have no formal training in design, but we were consumers, and we think that the best businesses and the best brands solve real problems, and we wanted to solve that. And we realized that smaller problems are easier to solve than larger ones. So what we decided to do is, hey, let's start off with a small collection, 27 shapes in roughly 3 colors each. We'll all use a similar material to start, cellulose acetate, so that way we only have to work with certain amount of factories. A typical optical shop has roughly 1,000 different frames, 1,000 SKUs, and that introduces complexity into the experience. So we wanted to design our first collection to be really tight, and we spent about a year and a half sort of developing this collection, building the brand. What we realized was that there were 3 things that we needed to launch: a collection, so we had product to sell, a store, which would be our website, and we would literally design the website. None of us were truly technical, so not only were we not true designers, we also weren't software engineers, and we designed our website on PowerPoint, because this was also, again, 2008, 2009, where desktop was king. So a PowerPoint slide kind of looked like the screen of a desktop, and we would print out every page, and we'd go to our friends and do user testing and say, hey, this is the home page, what button would you press? Oh, this takes you to the gallery page, what button would you press? This takes you to the product page. And we would iterate on that website over and over again. Simultaneously, while we're doing this, we're building out our brand architecture. We decided we wanted to build this transformative brand, but a brand that we would want to come to work to every day. And what did that really mean? That meant that we didn't want to have a morning where we wanted to roll over and hit the snooze button. And so that meant having a brand that would have a positive impact on the world. So that for us was making glasses as accessible to everyone as possible. So even though we were going to bring down the price from $500 to $95, there were still hundreds of millions of people around the world that didn't have access to glasses, so we committed to distributing a pair for every pair that we sold, and to make sure that we did that in a thoughtful way, so that way those good intentions didn't have unintended consequences. So we actually partnered with a nonprofit that I used to run, and I'm proud to say that we've now distributed several million pairs of glasses to people around the world. But as we were building this brand architecture, we started to think, what are the key messages, and what was going to be the communications hierarchy that we wanted to deliver to our customers? Because again, thinking about the entirety of the experience, if we only have 15 seconds or even milliseconds to capture the imagination and the attention of consumers, what were we going to lead with? So social mission was the reason why we were coming to work every day, but it wasn't going to be the reason why people were going to buy from us every day. And when we would survey our customers, survey potential customers, observe potential customers, sure enough, the most important thing was design. How did the frames look on the faces of the person purchasing it? So we wanted to lead with fashion. Next was going to be about price, right? That these were $95 instead of $500. That we were going to have exceptional service, take a page out of Zappos book and provide free shipping and free returns. Part of that was just the philosophy of how we want to guide the business, but also because buying glasses online was not natural. And when we were starting, less than 1% of glasses were sold online. We want to eliminate every friction point imaginable. So by offering free shipping and free returns, right, we were eliminating those friction points, and also hopefully portraying confidence that you're going to like this because we're going to support it. Now, of course, if we had return rates of Zappos, we wouldn't be in business, because when somebody returns a pair of glasses, you basically have to trash the lenses, because this is a custom product. It's very rare that somebody gets the same frame and has the same prescription in each eye and has the same pupillary distance, which is another measure that goes into making glasses. And lastly, we would actually inform you that we had this social mission. And in fact, most of our customers don't even learn about our social mission until after they've purchased from us. And in their gift box, they open that up. There's a case. We have a charcoal gift box. You open that up. It's a light gray case. You open that up. There's a pop of Warby Blue. You get your glasses. And then there's a note card that says, "Thank you for purchasing Warby Parker. Oh, and by the way, a pair is going to be distributed to someone in need." And I highlight this really as an example of how to be pragmatic, but think about the consumer in every part of the experience. So if we were going to build an amazing fashion label, our goal was to launch. You only have one time to launch, and we wanted to be in the best men's book and the best women's fashion book, and that was GQ and Vogue. So in those early days, we just invested in three things: our product, our website, and then PR. And we actually launched on February 15th, 2010, in features to Vogue and GQ, and the company shot off like a rocket ship. We hit our first year sales targets in 3 weeks, sold out of our top 15 styles in 4 weeks, had a waiting list of over 20,000 people. And something interesting happened. When we were in the planning process for the business, every time we would talk to our friends, they would say, you know, yeah, I want to pay less for glasses, but buying online is really difficult. This is a product that fit is so important. I want to touch and feel these glasses. So we created this home try-on program where we would ship people glasses. They'd have 5 pairs to choose from. We'd ship it to them. They had 5 days to try it on at home. And then if there was a pair they wanted, we would insert sort of the prescription lenses and send it to them. So from day one, we were always sort of mixing the digital and the physical, but more important, we were listening to our customers. So what happened when we launched to features in Vogue and GQ, we were selling like crazy, but we sort of ran out of inventory for our home try-on program. So we had to temporarily suspend it. And what happened, people started calling up and saying, "Hey, we heard you're in Philadelphia. You know, I just tried to do a home try-on, but there seems like there's no inventory left. Can I come into your office?" And we were like, we're working out of my apartment. So what we did was that we invited 5 customers. We limited the number because, you know, we didn't know if inviting somebody into my apartment at the time would, you know, forever ruin the brand reputation. And I remember one of those very first customers was a resident at the hospital, came in scrubs, and something really special happened. We created this bond because it's so rare that somebody is able to peek behind the curtain of a brand. And we believe that brands can build relationships with consumers just as human beings build relationships with each other, and that's through vulnerability. And frankly, in the age of the internet, you can't hide anyway. So we want to sort of tell the world what we're doing, but also how and why, and at times show some warts. So this is literally a photo of my apartment in Philadelphia. This is a real customer. This was the first store, was a West Elm table with a bunch of frames on it and a mirror. Our cash register was my co-founder's laptop, and people would check out through the website. And we found that people really enjoyed this. So when we were moving back to New York to set up an office, my first thought was, okay, let's make sure that we're in a location that's easily accessible. So we wanted to be around Union Square because there's lots of public transportation. The subways are there. A lot of our customers were sort of downtown New York type of folks. We found this great loft space with big southern-facing windows, so it had great light, and we decided to dedicate a portion of our office to be a showroom, a store. I mean, technically it was a showroom because legally we weren't allowed to sell or have retail, and I think showroom means that the product on display is not the actual product that you walk out with. So we were meeting that. And one of the first things that we learned was that having glasses on a table really sucks for the customer, right? It's a lot easier when it's at eye level. So these were the first shelves that we put up in our office. And we actually had the group Fort Standard, which is a great furniture design brand, build these for us. And every step of the way, we kept learning more and more. You know, one of the things that we learned was that actually long shelves are not ideal for shopping for glasses. There's a lot of research that shows that increased selection helps drive people into stores because you want choice, but then once you're in the store, too much selection, right, impedes that decision making. And we actually did a study with the retail lab at Wharton and found that ideally we would have 3 frames per shelf. We then started to experiment. Oh, we're selling a ton of glasses out of our office. What if we did a pop-up store? And in Soho, on Grand Street off of West Broadway, we found this 4,500 square foot garage that had never been used for retail before, and we created the Warby Parker Holiday Spectacle Bazaar. And it was a lot of fun. We, first of all, it was a massive space, and there's not an eyewear store in the history of the world that's ever been this big, because right, the product of glasses is this small, so we had to find a way to contain those, so we decided to buy some yurts and build yurts in the space. And why a yurt? Who doesn't like even saying the word yurt? I get a smile on my face. And we had additional space, so we had other brands come in that we sort of gave the space. We had Best Made do a pop-up there. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the brand Best Made, but one of their best-selling products are axes, which surprisingly sold out in 24 hours. I don't know why people in Manhattan need axes. We're selling Christmas trees as well, and actually one of the things that happened was on sort of like a weekend, I'm hanging out in the store, and we start hearing sirens and fire trucks pull up, and we're like, what's going on? I wonder if there's a fire nearby, and literally like 3 engines, circle the store. A bunch of firemen come in, and they're like, oh, you're not allowed to, there's a new law, you're not allowed to have live Christmas trees in public spaces like hotel lobbies or retail stores, so you have to get all of these Christmas trees out. So literally my assistant, who's probably 5 feet tall, and me are dragging these 12-foot Christmas trees out of the store. But the thing is, we learned a ton here. Number one, that lighting was really important. Number two, that within these yurts, again, because the heights are a little bit low, that having shelving and displaying product at knee level, probably you're not going to sell a lot of glasses that way. So this started to inform how we would design future stores. One of the things that we also did was buy an old yellow school bus, because we always had this idea of we could take Warby Parker on the road and expose the brand across the country. School buses are surprisingly inexpensive because a lot of state law says sort of mandatory retirement. I think it was like $10,000, believe it or not. Of course, outfitting it was a lot more. We worked with a person that designs yachts and high-end motor coaches, and we put oak shelving in. We made our own map. We went to 15 different cities. In each city, we were in 3 different locations. So at the end of our class trip, we had data on what intersections would work best if we were to open up a retail store. And then we added just little fun elements. When you bought a pair of glasses, it came in a brown paper bag like it was lunch. We had sweatshirts, the Warby Parker class trip. We had our crest there. We sold flasks if you were the type of kid that used to hang out in the back of the bus. And it was just this fun experience. And learning through these low-risk ways, through pop-up shops and our bus, gave us the confidence to then sign a 10-year lease in Soho and spend $1.5 million on a build-out and build a beautiful store, but also a way to really capture the essence of the brand. So Warby Parker comes from 2 early Jack Kerouac characters, Warby Pepper and Zag Parker. We discovered these characters at the New York Public Library. So for our first store, we wanted to pay homage to that civic institution. Our shelves are designed like the book stacks of a library. We have these library lamps. We bought and had custom-built rolling ladders from the Putnam Ladder Company that was started in 1908. And you start to see these elements in a bunch of our stores. Poured terrazzo floors, again, like civic buildings. While we were experimenting, trying to understand what type of format we should build, we opened up a second-floor retail here on Newbury Street. This store is actually way too crowded. We do over $5,000 a square foot in sales here. It's like from a profitability standpoint, it's the most amazing thing ever, but it's not an ideal customer experience because it's just way too crowded right now. But we were trying to figure out, hey, do we need to be at ground level? Are we a destination or not? But you see some of the same elements from our store on Green Street. We're now about to open in 2 weeks in the Prudential Center, and there'll be additional stores opening up in Boston. And we haven't announced it yet, but there might be something very close to here in the near future, which I'm very excited about. I'm just going to show you a few more images of some of our stores. This is on 82nd and Lex. If you know the Upper East Side of Manhattan, you know that prime retail is on Madison or on 3rd Avenue, but we had this opportunity to brand an entire building that had this old marquee that we were able to sort of refinish and renew. And this was a pharmacy that was over 95 years old, but then went out of business 2 years before we signed the lease, so we had nothing to do with it closing, and tried to continue to pay homage to this space. We were able to restore the original terrazzo floor and keep elements of the pharmacy, but still add some of our sort of unique aesthetic, our library shelving, for example. As we've built more and more, we've sort of evolved, but we try and keep certain things, learnings throughout our stores, whether it is proper lighting, the types of shelving, even though now we have several different types of shelving that fit our design aesthetic, but you'll all notice that they're generally a bay format with a full-length mirror, and that was because actually in my apartment quickly learned that people don't like using a small vanity mirror, even though every optical shop in the country uses those small, shitty mirrors. People want to see themselves in a full-length mirror. Also, in a typical optical shop, right, the glasses are under lock and key or behind the counter, out of reach. And one of the reasons why I'm focusing a lot on this is because, right, I don't believe retail is dying. I think that a lot of retail is mediocre, and mediocre retail should die, and that we should be a lot more thoughtful about these experiences. One of the things that we quickly learned is that people wanted to come in and get their glasses adjusted, so we created in the back there a reference desk. Again, pays homage to libraries, and now we've used technology to allow queuing systems, so people can log in once they get into a store and immediately get sort of called up when it's their time to go into get their glasses adjusted. Just a few more quick examples. This is our store in Abbot Kinney. This was a hideous building that had a slanted roof. We squared it off and worked with Jeff McFetrich, an LA-based artist, to do a mural. In Wynwood, we were one of the first retailers in there, so we wanted to reduce risk as much as possible and spend as little on build-out as possible. So we kept the concrete floor, but we painted it to look like a pool, and you can see the 8-foot line there. We then commissioned a seat to be made out of concrete and painted it yellow so it would look like a float. And if you look at the top there, we affixed a photo booth to the ceiling so you could lie down and have your photo taken. And we print out 2 copies of the photo so you can share it with a friend. And of course, if you enter your email or your Twitter handle or your phone number, we'll text you the image as well to add some virality there. But again, the idea here is just to make this fun. The other thing that we've done is Warby Parker, as we started as an e-commerce company, we have a really large technology team. So we've built our point of sale completely from scratch because we didn't think that there was anything available out there. And is there anything more frustrating than buying something and then going into a store and not being able to return it? And you have all these luxury retailers in which you buy something that's ridiculously expensive. Let's say you buy it from another store, you buy it online, and then you go into the store and they're not able to look up your customer record, right? That's just crazy town to me and to everybody else. And technology fixes that, and it's not really fancy technology. So one of our main advantages is that we have one customer database that we're able to run all of our systems out of. And we run this off of iPad minis that all of our associates have. We don't have staff in back of house because everyone's able to be on the floor because they have all the information in the palm of their hands. And I'd be happy to tell you more about that when we're about to sit down. But thank you for the opportunity to tell you a little bit about the Warby Parker story. We now have 47 stores across the country. Again, something that we didn't envision. We think that the future is one of blended retail, and it's one where value still matters, service still matters, and convenience still matters. So the basics still apply, but now we have so many more tools at our disposal to make exceptional customer experiences. So thank you.
So, Professor Lal, I'm going to, thinking about that last element from Neil's presentation about the degree of which the employees are sort of decentralized, they're engaged, there's actually a level of expertise that they represent in terms of product engagement. My own experience in the store would suggest that there is this unique sense of experience. And then I think on the flip side of things, I think that, in thinking in terms of labor economy, right, we have 4.8 million people in the United States who work in retail. Roughly 20% of those people work in department stores. We have two ends of the equation. We have companies like Miyagi, which are providing real-time intelligence on differentiated products that are keeping those employees, those salespeople that are engaged, they have a level of specialization and expertise, almost semi-skilled in a way, leading to a skilled workforce. On the other end of the equation, we have bots that are doing inventory management at a tenth of the price. I'm curious in terms of what are some of the labor implications here relating to retail on both ends of the equation in terms of displacement, but also in terms of opportunity and expertise.
So I think it's absolutely true that this is going to have a big impact on employment. And we're already seeing it. I mean, if you take a look at the last election, I mean, the data is there to show you that so many jobs are being lost to automation and technology. And if you ask the question, how do you solve that problem, we can either be very despondent about it, or we can ask the question, you know, we all say to ourselves, we don't have enough time to do the things that we love to do, whether it be spending time with our families, whether it be pursuing our hobbies, or, you know, going to concerts, movies, what have you, right? So here's an opportunity where technology allows you to accomplish more with less. So why is this such a problem that if this technology allows us to live our lives in a very different way, where in 20 hours of work, we can accomplish most of what we can do? So I think this is an opportunity to ask the fundamental question, what is the purpose of work in our lives?
Yeah, Neil, maybe you want to pick up on, I mean, I go to your store, my experience is, wow, there's other things that be happening here. You think about the implications of eye care. Something like 80, 90% of people don't regularly get eye appointments. Where's the service begin? Diabetes, for instance, that's an early indicator relative to eye health. I mean, there's public health implications, there's a service. Where does that end and where does that begin in your mind?
I think it's a few different things. So one is that there's this great tech talk that talks about the ATM and how everyone feared that the ATM was going to make it so that way there were no bank employees at these branches. And what happened is that it's just that the actual employment increased because banks could open up more branches and operate them less expensively, and that they actually shifted the work that the branch employees were doing to more high-value work that required human interaction. We think about this a lot. I don't want my team spending a lot of time with customers on low-value interactions. So a low-value interaction is asking you what's your shipping address, what's your email address, right? Where a high-value interaction is a warm greeting and a welcome. It's helping you find the right frame for your face. So we actually, in our point of sale, we call it a point of everything, and it's actually POE from Edgar Allan Poe. Everything has literary references, but we have timers, and our product design team is constantly working on this, figuring out how do we reduce the time of these low-value interactions, but also not at the expense of losing eye contact. And one other thought just around other technology that's emerging. In the next few years, most of you will not be getting your eyeglasses or contact lens prescription by going into to see an optometrist in an eye exam room. You're going to get it by downloading an app and doing it at home. Or doing it through a quick device that a doctor will then check on the back end and send you that prescription. Might this hurt the economics of some optometrists? Maybe, but if that saves millions of people, you know, they spend maybe $20 instead of $75 for an eye exam, and it saves them from taking time off of work or spending 2 hours to travel to get that eye exam. That's a home run.
Or just having the eye exam at all.
Exactly.
Right. So,
especially if you're in rural areas and don't have access to healthcare.
Right. So I want to take advantage of Craig here and think about, you know, one of the things that pulling from Warby and thinking about the level of curation in a way. And your expertise and your experience has been curating not on necessarily an individual brand level, but collectively as an identity, as a district level. And then you think about, contextualizing J.C. Nichols, James Rouse, any number of people who have defined placemaking within the context of retail. So if we end with a different type of footprint, and we end up with a level of curation and management in a way, an active engagement about managing retailers. I thought maybe you could share with us some of your experiences and how one curates as much as manages a district that speaks to placemaking, that speaks to retail, that speaks to a mode of engagement that builds foot traffic, but also a sense of identity urbanistically.
Well, right now everyone talks about experience. When they talk about retail, the word you hear is it has to be an experience. It can't just be about a transaction. And I don't know the answer, but I wonder a lot what that means, because you have a word, and then when you try to figure out what that word actually means and how to apply it, it gets a little more confusing. And everybody thinks they make a great experience, but what is actually a tantalizing, enriching, fun experience? And for us, my business is building neighborhoods, and in the case of the design district, the genesis of it was the precursor for me was working in South Beach, and South Beach was kind of a rundown, nothing place, and it really gave birth to a renaissance in Miami. And I learned that there's a combination of entertainment, like that festive kind of vibe that Florida is born out of. Florida was always an attraction, and the ultimate manifestation of that attraction is Disney. Like, you think Disney World, that's a place that is coming from this idea that we're going to get people to get on a train and come down to Florida and want to do things that are fun. You can wrestle with alligators, or you can go on a roller coaster. And so as we became more sophisticated, and what I learned from is that if things are real, if they really stand for something, and this is the contradiction to Epcot, instead of it being a fake invented place, if it's a real place, then that's even more meaningful and will resonate more deeply with people that go and have that experience. And so in the case of South Beach, it started just with these incredible historical buildings. Like, instead of mowing the whole place down, we renovated and figured out how to adaptively reuse those buildings. And in the design district, it's more of an intersection between culture and business, where we invest equally in the culture side of the neighborhood as we do in creating just venues for people to sell things. And it's interesting because it's a similar kind of mission, even though they're very different businesses. Like, when I hear Neil talk about Warby, and I think in my mind, wow, if I buy a pair of glasses, like, someone else is going to get one for free. What a bonus, and I'm paying less than I'll pay in most other places to get a stylish pair of glasses. Well, in the design district, we want it to just be a place that you want to go. It's something you have to see and experience because of the architecture, because of the art, the things that are available to the public, the aspects of it that are free, the overall experience of the neighborhood, and then to inspire and challenge the retailers to actually compete with that, so that the retail experiences that they're making also make an important statement about place and culture and art and design and architecture.
What's that underlying strategy in terms of getting these retailers to understand the synergistic impact and relationship to each other? Because, as you recognize, many lease structures, for instance, are written with levels and degrees of exclusion, and they're cued in on where the conflict is, but are they cued in on where the synergies are? And what's your take on how to manage that?
Well, the way that we've done it is to create a very positive sense of competition. So when a brand comes into the design district, they're first trying to outdo us, and we hope they all do. And they're also trying to outdo each other by making a very specific statement. What's interesting is almost none of these brands have done exactly what they normally do in the design district. They've hired different designers, different architects. They've kind of broken away from the normal formula. And I think over time, just continuing to build on that spirit and reinvest in that spirit of where we all have a common vision, but everybody's going to express themselves in their own way. And that's what makes any place interesting.
Yeah, place of experimentation. Eric, I want to switch to you. And one of the things that we've been in conversation with is that in drawing parallels of supply chain management in the built environment, materials, lumber, whatever, plastics. And then you think about that and the relative durability with that. But you also think about the implications in terms of sustainability and the well-defined parameters of supply chain, FSC, things like that. Where is your technology engaged in supporting a continuum of supply chains? Because there's this disconnect in supply chain. I think Neil could probably cue in on this as well. But what in underlying to your technology speaks to connecting the life cycle to connect to the supply chain that actually gives some degree of transparency in the promotion of sustainability? Because if there's anything that's a value add that I recognize, it's that understanding the impact of these materials, the sourcing of it, and maybe I can even come back to Professor Lal in terms of transparency of pricing relating to unit costs, but maybe you could inform us on where that ends up.
Yeah, so increasingly in retail and fashion, footwear, apparel, vendors, or think of as suppliers from all around the world, are playing a much bigger role than they ever have. So you go into a retailer like a Target and buy something that's private label there. That was probably not even designed by them. It was probably designed actually by one of their suppliers. So that kind of enforces or causes them to need technology to be able to collaborate with those suppliers in a way that they had never done before. And when whether it's the supplier or the retailer or the brand is creating product, they are also looking to design sustainability in it. So when they pick materials to go into a particular product, one of the things the technology will do is tell them the sustainability aspects of the materials right there in the system so that they don't have to contact the supplier or go somewhere else to get that information. So what everybody that we work with is trying to achieve in the supply chain is a couple of things: transparency, sustainability, and obviously speed and cost. So the technology kind of enables collaboration, visibility, transparency, to enable them to do all those things.
Yeah, so Professor Lal, transparency. One of the trends that we see, digital shelving, real-time pricing. Digital shelving allows that. As well as the highlighting what's your unit cost, right? It costs this much to make it, I'm selling it for this. These are two trends in retail. Where are those elasticities? Where's the empirical research telling us about consumer responses to these things?
So I think in terms of cost, there has been some research that shows that, if you can help people see exactly where the costs come from, they draw inferences about the quality of the product. So that's very good in that sense, having transparency in terms of exactly what am I paying for. And then on the other side, if you think about all the dynamic pricing that's happening, that's increasingly being done by engines, right? So, and it depends on a whole bunch of variables, including what you bought in the past, what time of the day you're there. Take a look at what goes on in terms of Expedia, what have you. You can be there 3 times in a day and you can get 3 very different prices. So that in some ways confuses the issue. But on the cost side, I think it's a plus.
Yeah, and I think from a state consumer protection, laws have not caught up in many cases to these things. Neil, I just one of the things that stood out to me was your recognition of the supply chain immediately in terms of the value add. To what extent is that an ongoing challenge as styles progress, as the turnover happens in your design lines? How much of a challenge is that to keep up with the supply chain?
So far, one of the things that we've always wanted to do is exert as much control over the entirety of our value chain as possible, right? We're sort of the poster child for a vertically integrated brand because that allows us to sell stuff at a cheaper price and control the quality of the experience. So one of the things that we've recently done is we've gotten into light manufacturing for the first time. We opened up an optical lab about an hour outside of New York where we cut the lenses and insert them into the frames. We're going to be hiring 130 people over the next year or so. And one of the reasons why we did this was we want to always be the last person touching the product before it goes to customers. In the age of Amazon and Uber, right, people want stuff as quickly as possible. So the proximity to, right, a major metropolitan area makes sense, and we'll be opening up more of these optical labs across the country. We have a data science team that is, building models that are far more sophisticated than models typically used of companies our size, that you'd see at much larger companies, that enable us to position inventory effectively, that enable us to basically allocate orders across optical labs, because while we have our own, we also work with some third parties in which we optimize based on getting product to customer faster and at a lower price. So one of the recent changes that we made is that our customer experience team, so if you call or live chat or text us or email us, or if they're processing an order, in the past, they would have to select which shipping to provide the customer. And let's say we wanted to upgrade someone and do expedited shipping. I don't want our team thinking, hey, what's the right carrier to use? I just want our team thinking about when do they need to get the product there. So if they say, I got to get the product there tomorrow, great. They press that button, and then the machine learning that we've built in the back end will optimize to figure out exactly which carrier to use, and that's going to get there at the lowest price. But these are all examples of how to use technology in a way that betters consumers. And I think all too often in retail we see gimmicks. Another example would be 3D printing. So this goes to Eric's presentation. The way we're using 3D printing is for prototyping of samples, because it's going to be a long time before you 3D print frames and lenses. Especially what's 3D printing prototyping is allowing us to do is even get more sophisticated with our design to use multiple materials. And so you're going to see design of frames, and frankly, probably all apparel and accessories push the envelope, which may push the day out for when everything is 3D printed, actually a little bit longer, because 3D printing prototypes helps push traditional manufacturing forward.
I think in the time remaining, it'd be maybe open it up to questions.
That was an interesting point about the amount of fashion samples that were thrown away in waste. But at the same time, if you're developing new retail practices that lead to greater consumption, then you're also increasing material use, energy use, and ultimately waste as well. So is there a net gain or a net loss for the environment in these new retail practices, and how much consumption do we really want? This is a good time, I mean, not in this session, to talk about a consumerist ethic in society, and whether that's one of our goals, or whether that's gives you a lot of meaning in life. I mean, this is something that ties into the whole cultural ethic in this society.
So upcycling, downcycling, anybody?
This is a hard one.
It's a tough it's a tough question, but admittedly, the extent to which there's multiple uses of fabric and material, I think that's definitely a real challenge.
Yeah, I mean, in general, retailers and brand owners are moving to design sustainability into more of their products, because we as consumers care about that, and they, a lot of them will use that as a way of marketing their goods that differentiates them from other folks. But so it's being designed in. I think the move towards virtual, towards 3D printing, those things will ultimately take waste out of the system, in both cost, time, and actual physical material. So I think it's heading in the right direction.
Question.
Yeah, Craig, you mentioned the experience economy, and actually from HBS, I think Pine and Gilman wrote a lot about transforming employees into actors, and those employees then carrying out a staged experience for consumers in this, experience economy. And then Eric, you talked about store operations and using technology like AR and VR, I believe, to train employees. And essentially, you could take this technology and use it to characterize those employees, transforming them into actors. Now, over to you, Neil. Do you see Warby ever using these technologies to train your employees? Because it seems like you've had a lot of success with a more tactile and more human experience than a lot of these digital experiences.
Absolutely. I'll give you an example. Like, we've never used virtual reality or AR for the sake of virtual reality or AR, but a neat way that we're using technology is one of the things that we observed where customers were walking into our stores with crumpled up pieces of paper with the frame names on it. Over 75% of our customers that purchase in our stores have been to our website first. And they're going to the website not just to look for the store address and hours of operation, because frankly, right, the majority of people are using mobile devices now. And when you Google Warby Parker, Boston, Google tells you exactly where the store is, hours of operation, and even when the busiest times of day are. So you have to scroll past that under the fold to get to our website, click on it, and then you start browsing. So what we decided to do was to create a bookmark, again, that literary reference, where people could favorite certain frames. Then they had a digital list. They come into our store, and they have that on their device. We also have the customer record, so any one of our retail advisors can pull it up on their iPad mini and help folks select those frames. Likewise, we don't care where the transaction takes place. We like to say we're experience focused, but medium agnostic. So likewise, people in store, if they're trying on the glasses, we've built, again, it's not rocket science technology, but off of our point of everything, we can snap photos of people wearing different frames and send them a really nicely formatted email or text that's one click, add to cart. So if they want to, show perhaps their partner at home, hey, these are what the frames look like. Can you help me decide which one? Right, we've enabled that. So we spend a lot of time looking at customer behavior and trying to figure out how do we make it easier, faster, more fun, more convenient. But virtual reality, we will likely be using in the near term more for retail design than we necessarily will for a customer-facing experience.
It's interesting, in the world of real estate, in both commercial and retail, Floored, which just got bought, I think, by JLL, very similar platform of engagement, VR, design, cost estimation, and taking it a step further, even within the aspects of the built environment. Maybe one last question. Oh, two questions. Yep.
My question's for Craig. Designing a district as opposed to a singular shopping experience, I'm curious how much transportation is on your mind, transportation policy, particularly in Miami, which is so car-oriented, and then also, these ideas of using smart technologies like Uber and self-driving cars. I don't know if you think about that, if you try to push for that in Miami or anything like that.
It's actually one of my main focuses, and there's lots of aspects to it. One is parking, because you have to have adequate parking, but as technology and also public transportation expands, you can attract more people without needing parking, and so that's an important component. Secondly, we see the trend, like definitely there's more people using Uber, which is great, and less people that are bringing cars and needing to park them, which makes the neighborhood more accessible. There's huge issues in a project like ours just with access, vehicular access. So we're working very hard with the city, county, and the state to figure out how to, over time, continue to improve the access points. And that's not just for the design district, but all the neighborhoods around it, because Wynwood is sort of attached to us in this other neighborhood called Midtown. And finally, I think the really big thing is to tackle public transportation. And what's happening in Miami is Miami was always, even though we had a downtown, a completely suburban city. Nobody ever lived and walked virtually anywhere. South Beach was the first place where people lived and walked. And now you're seeing a lot of neighborhoods in Miami actually become urban, where people walk around. And so once that happens, the next thing that's logical is they're not going to all necessarily want to be able to or need to have cars. And so I think that public transportation is really becoming viable in Miami, and a key to us in the design district is to figure out how to attach to it, and that's multifaceted because there's also going to be a high-speed train now that's going to connect Miami and Orlando, a train that will connect the different counties, so you can go from Palm Beach to downtown Miami, and then all of the internal kind of transportation links.
Yeah, and if you think about the last mile problem, logistics, delivery, the efficiencies or inefficiencies associated with it, to what extent can mass transit engage on that end of the equation? One last question.
Yeah, so my question regarding the role of the employee in the whole customer experience. How much of how vital is that role? And if there's any sort of research done regarding whether paying them hourly, sales-wise, and motivating towards the whole tantalizing customer experience. Just anyone to answer that.
Maybe I can go quickly because we think a lot about compensation. First, I would say that the role of the employee depends very much on the category, right? And also the category depends on online, impacts online penetration, right? In the next 5 years, I would be shocked if any one of you guys buy paper towels in a bricks and mortar store, right? You shouldn't do that. You don't need to be thinking about it. Maybe in an emergency situation at a gas station or something. But eyeglasses, right, which are really tough to fit, and people are actually terrible eyeglass consumers. And one of the reasons for that is because when somebody's charging you $700 for a pair of glasses, they have to justify it and make it really complicated and put the glasses under lock and key so you can't even touch them until they bring it out, and tell you all about all these fancy coatings on it, which aren't that fancy, right? Pretty much every lens has anti-scratch coating, so if you pay extra for anti-scratch coating, you're getting ripped off. So we think about the employee as, right, how do they enhance the experience? And in order to do that, we need to make sure that the incentives are aligned for the overall experience. So some of the reasons why retailers aren't prepared for an omni-channel world is because they're incentivizing store managers and retail employees to capture that sale in the four walls of that store when that might not be in the customer's best interest. So an example that I gave about that bookmark, we count those towards sales of the store. We think about, instead of same store sales growth, we think about same city sales growth. Again, we don't care where the sale happens, whatever is the best path for the customer. And those customer journeys between online and offline are way more complicated. The other thing that we've been doing is incentivizing our staff based on what we call a retail experience score. And that is that we survey customers within 24 hours of visiting the store. And that survey is different from Net Promoter Score, which for us, we tend to survey later on because the glasses are custom made and they take a few days to arrive and so on. So you just always need to incentivize the team according to what your goals are. And for us, it's customer experience.
Great. All right. Thank you very much to our panelists for joining us on Future of Retail.